And a roll call.
We'll do both. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs. Commissioner Klein. Commissioner Gibb-Randall. Commissioner Mills. Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau. Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Woods. We have quorum.
Thank you. We'll begin with introductions. Do we have any this evening?
We do not.
All right. Moving on to approval of minutes. We have the minutes before us for the April 3rd, 2018 meeting. Do I have a commissioner that will move that? Moved by Commissioner Gibb-Randall, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. Do we have discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? Those are approved. Moving on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers and committees, and written communication and petitions. Starting with City Council. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last night was a long meeting. We adjourned this morning. In the long agenda, a few items of note. First, the art fair, which is a centerpiece of our culture here in Ann Arbor. We've redesigned the funding structure through which we recapture cost from the 5 different art fairs that make up what we know as the Ann Arbor Art Fair. This more evenly distributes cost amongst the 5 of them in a more fair and equitable way, and will provide for a sustained financial structure for years to come. The next is the Unified Development Code, which is the rewrite of our entire zoning code, which we're delving into tonight. This has been a 9-year process of examining the 10 different chapters of our city code that involve real estate development, reorganizing them and rewriting them into a more modern format and a more user-friendly format so that folks like the people in this room can more quickly and easily understand and navigate our city law. That, after 9 years, has gone to City Council for the first time, and it passed its first reading last night. The second reading will occur in the first meeting of June. 3 items that explicitly touch the Planning Commission. 1, special exemption uses are a type 2, I believe. Public participation. There's been interest among City Council in the wake of the many medical marijuana provisioning centers coming through the pipeline, as well as the Rainbow Care Child Center up on the northeast side of town, that be reexamined, and that a citizen participation meeting and citizen participation report be required as part of any SEU application. So that'll be coming to us for our recommendation. The next is, as you all are aware, when we recommended the zoning ordinance for medical marijuana, provisioning centers were required to be 1,000 feet apart from each other. City Council reduced that distance requirement to 600 feet, but is now rethinking that 1,000 may be more appropriate. As is process with ordinance amendments, it has to come back to this body. I imagine we will stick with our original recommendation. The next is City Council has imposed a 60-day moratorium on all medical marijuana provisioning centers. We will still honor those applications that have been submitted and received by staff. Those will continue to be processed in due course. However, with those 60 days also comes a request from staff that we examine the possibility of putting on a cap to the number of provisioning centers allowed within the city, similar to the cap we have for liquor licenses. I was about to say finally, but it's not. Penultimately, the Michigan State Legislature is examining the opportunity of adding a historic preservation and historic rehabilitation tax credit, which would incentivize property owners to do historic renovations on their older homes or businesses. It's an exciting opportunity. I'm glad the conversation is happening at Lansing. Any opportunity we have to economically incentivize people to save their old historic character-filled homes and businesses should be taken, and I'm glad the state is exploring that, and the city of Ann Arbor has officially endorsed those pieces of legislation. Finally, is the Y-Lot. Last night we went into closed session and got updates from the city attorney about the deliberations with the Dahlman organization regarding 350 South Fifth, the old YMCA property. We have postponed any motion. Obviously, it's open litigation, and there is only so much I can say. I still believe that it is the appropriate course of action to tender the $4.2 million to exercise our right to buy back the property. And I think it's the fiscally responsible thing to do, and I think it's the way that we gain control of that site and ensure that whatever is built on that prime piece of downtown real estate reflects the community's desires.
Thank you. Moving on to planning manager.
Very briefly, as a reminder, we have our retreat coming up next week on Monday morning. I know that's exactly how you want to spend your Monday morning. I will be sending out some additional details later this week with that agenda and what we hope to accomplish. If you have any questions after that, please feel free to let me know. But again, this will be the first step in putting together our draft work plan for the coming fiscal year and forms that foundation.
I'm sorry, with the chair's indulgence, are you done, Mr. Leonard?
The location will be in the same place as last year, the jury assembly room.
One additional point on the Y lot that's important. We're calling a special session this next Monday, April 23rd, to again go into closed session to get an update on the litigation and again vote on the future of this lot. Ordinarily, City Council only has voting sessions the first and third Mondays of each month, but given the stakes and the timeline pressure of this situation, we've called a special session to again hold those votes. I will also be bringing an intent resolution forward at that same time that will outline a vision of how we can use that land to maximize the amount of affordable housing and workforce housing on that site. I hope that it presents a compelling case for why the city's repurchase of this land at a reduced cost is the best thing to do.
Thank you. Planning Commission officers and committees. Written communications and petitions. We have received a lot of written communications for this meeting, so please take a look through that. Moving forward to audience participation. This is the time for the audience to participate during our meeting on an item that is not, or on items that are not on our agenda. So if there's anyone who wishes to speak about an item that's not on our agenda, you have 3 minutes. Please come up to the podium, state your name for the record, and no one's jumping up here, so we will move on. Public hearing scheduled for next business meeting. Mr. Leonard.
I'm frantically trying to find them here myself. Okay, for the May 1st meeting, scheduled public hearings include 3365 Jackson Avenue. This is a proposed planned unit development and site plan for a 3-story senior independent living facility with 95 units, including affordable housing, public park area, and off-site public improvements associated with that planned unit development. Next, we have a proposed rezoning petition for 1140 Broadway. This is 1140 Broadway was recently approved for a conditional rezoning and site plan by City Council. This is a proposed amendment to the conditional zoning for that petition. They are requesting to essentially link the approved site plan as a condition of that rezoning to provide some certainty as to what would be realized at that site. And then finally, the last scheduled new public hearing for this agenda would be 2455 South Main Street. This is a request to rezone a 0.4 acre lot from R4B residential to office.
Great, thank you. It'll be another fun-filled meeting. Moving on to unfinished business. Before us, we have the cottages at Barton Green site plan and wetland use permit for City Council approval. We'll begin with the staff report with Mr. Khan, then move on to public comment and then discussion. Mr. Khan.
Thank you. I'd just like to briefly summarize the staff report. On October 17, 2017, Planning Commission postponed this petition to provide the petitioner opportunity to address staff comments related to traffic impacts, utility easements, and landscaping. On March 6, 2018, Planning Commission postponed the petition again to provide the petitioner an opportunity to address Planning Commission comments related to parking, housing choices, the proposed shuttle, and sustainability elements. The petitioner responded to those major issues. Their responses are within the body of the staff report, so I think I'll not summarize each of those, but they include items such as deferred parking, housing choices, covered bicycle parking, sustainability elements, private shuttle, traffic analysis, parking in nearby neighborhoods, target market demographics, and meeting with neighbors. Staff recommends that the petition be approved because it complies with all applicable local, state, and federal ordinances, standards, and regulations. It will not cause a public or private nuisance and will not have a detrimental effect on public health, safety, and welfare. Staff also recommends approval of the wetland use permit because it limits disturbance to the minimum necessary to reasonably accomplish the permitted use.
Thank you. We will now open public comment to those who wish to speak on this item. This is a continuation of public comment from last meeting, or the last time this was before us. So we ask that only new comments be delivered to us today. So if you would please step up to the podium and make sure to sign in as well. And state your name for the record.
All right, my name is Scott Newell. And these are comments regarding the variance for Bloom that you're considering?
This is actually so currently we are only discussing the cottages at Barton Green site plan. So that is later on our agenda.
Oh, forgive me for taking up your time, sorry.
Hello, I'm Joan OConnell. Thank you for letting us make comments again. I didn't do it before, but there we are. You've heard a lot from the people that live in the area. My concern is with the integrity of what we say Ann Arbor is. I have a lot of quotations from the website and the master plan. Ann Arbor will be, Ann Arbor is, it's all about things which are green and wonderful and preserved and maintained. City of Ann Arbor will be a dynamic community, providing a safe and healthy place to live, work, and recreate. Natural systems will be improved and protected. The quality of life in Ann Arbor will be characterized by its diversity, beauty, vibrancy, livability, and ultimately will depend upon the positive interaction of these systems. It appears to me that the Planning Commission is actually there to implement the master plan, which goes on and on and on in many pages. So my first concern is with the natural area, which has already been approved to be not natural any longer. You guys probably weren't there when they clear cut the part for North Sky, but really, in Ann Arbor, we're gonna clear cut our woods, just, they have this special machine that chews it up and spits it out. That's kind of embarrassing to me as a citizen from Ann Arbor. The city of Ann Arbor has always prided itself in maintaining a green image through the preservation of open space, parkland, and natural features. That's a direct quote from your website. What about the 559 parking spots? That's like a quarter of Arbor land, guys. The structured parking is what we're recommending in the action statements under Objective 2. This is, you know what Objective 2 I'm talking about, under natural systems in your master plan. It says, action statements encourage multi-story buildings where appropriate structured parking as opposed to on-the-street parking where you have 559 pieces of land which are covered with cement now, over which there is runoff. Oh, look at that. We're supposed to be concerning with water quality in the Huron River. One of the largest pollution sources for surface water quality is storm water runoff. Now, I know you've all looked at the plan, you've gone on, but I guess my basic I'm really saying, really? Are we really going to do this in Ann Arbor? And I hope that we're not saying, you know, it's just this little 30 acres in the north part of Ann Arbor, and there's so many more important things to do over here. I hope you're not saying that, because a whole lot of people live on the north side of Ann Arbor already. It just took us 10 minutes to get from where we live, which is 2 blocks from Barton Drive and Pontiac Trail, there were cars backed up at 6:30 at night, 14 or 15 cars backed up in every single direction. Guys, really? We're going to add, 700 more people out there? That's not good. Just to quote Bob Dylan, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? You know the rest of the song. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Karen Warmingham, and I've lived at 2361 Hilldale Drive here in Highlands for nearly 50 years. It's been a great neighborhood. I'm opposed to this development at Cottages of Barton Green, and want the Planning Commission to reject the developer's proposal to build more than 700 student beds. I oppose this for many reasons, but one of the main ones is because of the unresolved safety issues. The developer's traffic engineers have shown that traffic safety and walker safety, that's automobiles and the public, will have an unexpected poor result, and if this is allowed to be built. And that's terrible. It's a safety issue for the residents and for the people in here in Highlands, Arrowwood, and every other neighborhood that exits onto Pontiac Trail. I hope you will listen to the many citizens of Ann Arbor that have come before you, and I hope you reject this proposal for the cottages at Barton Green. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Rowe, and I live at 2955 Bateson Court. I've lived in that area for about 30 years now, 31 years. I'm a retired automotive engineer and was at your October 17th meeting. The portion of that meeting that dealt with the housing proposal that we're talking about lasted about 3.5 hours, and about 40 of us spoke. My understanding was that the project was indefinitely postponed, as it should be. Although the minutes of that meeting have not been posted, there's a good video that you put online of the various issues that the community members raised. These included concerns about detrimentally changing the character of our existing neighborhood and the whole Pontiac Trail area, and some people already spoke about that tonight, creating a transient population, the traffic impact of the project, and that was from Trinitas's own study, negative online reviews posted by Trinitas tenants at their existing projects, Trinitas's lax or incompetent on-site management, the safety for the school kids, and that was brought up, and it was brought up again tonight. I think that's really important. The deferred parking, the covered bicycle storage and parking, and then there's things like the student opinions on this being a good spot for development. We didn't see any of that. And the facilitation of the bus use and less use of a private shuttle. Now, my understanding is that Trinitas's response or implicit attitude is we're not doing it and you can't make us do it. Could be wrong there, but that's what filtered down to us. And this seemed basically orthogonal to the verbiage that they have on their website. And I went to their website, and I'll just read a couple little things here. They say, development. We are an established leader in identifying development opportunities and creating properties that have broad housing appeal to students and the communities in which we build. We understand, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, that's one of the things that they're saying they do. And then they say, we build exceptional real estate. We are a principled organization who is passionate about the people and purposeful about the communities we develop. So, the responses that we've gotten from them, to me, seem that they're not in line with that. In fact, at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where they have a community, what Trinitas did is they changed the building from being 6 stories to being 4 stories, so it wasn't blocking a historical area. It doesn't seem like they're interested in doing that around here. So, in my opinion, this project should not move forward based upon it does not fit into our community, and presents little value. And also, Trinitas's rigid attitude is not one we wish to deal with. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you.
Almost on time.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission, for working on our behalf, for endeavoring to build a better community for Ann Arbor, all of the time that you spend and have spent on this issue. And I want to thank my neighbors for how eloquent they've been in voicing our concerns about this development. I feel very sad that when I come to meetings after meetings, it doesn't feel as though we're listened to. When I walk in the morning with my dog, I feel as though I'm taking my life into my own hands with the traffic that is there now. I live at 333 Hilldale Drive. My name is Aida McGowan. I've lived there for 33 years, and within the past 5 years, the whole traffic situation around our area has changed dramatically, and it's very, very dangerous. Traffic that drives on Barton Drive goes very fast. Nobody observes the speed limit. Pontiac Trail as well. When I walk up Hilldale Drive from 333 up to Delafield, around, I have cut through traffic coming at high speed, nearly bowling over my dog and I. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like when there are 700 college students there racing around to get to and from class. It's not close to the university. 2 miles away, we've said that at other meetings. This morning, because of the weather conditions and traffic, there was traffic backed up all the way to the lights of Barton Drive and Pontiac Trail. So is a student going to class going to be able to get to class on time? Is a bus that goes going to be able to get the student to class on time? And as other neighbors have voiced, we pride ourselves on being a tree-friendly city, a city that values nature, and yet all around me, the environment, the natural environment is being clear-cut. Clear-cut. So I hope that you will listen to us when we say we don't want the character of Ann Arbor damaged anymore, the character of our neighborhood damaged anymore, and I hope you listen to many of us who have said we are afraid for our safety. And I feel as though it's being blown off completely. Oh, the developers address this. Oh, the developers address that. Well, we haven't seen it.
Thank you.
My name is Bridget Kasich. I've lived in that area since 1981, 82. And I'm a list person, so I have a list. Number one, the traffic that this project will generate along Barton Drive and Pontiac Trail. With that high bedroom density and the fact that every bedroom will house a potential driver, we can't even figure out how you can evaluate the impact. Number two, the overflow parking onto Huron Highlands. With fewer parking spots than residents, about 60 fewer, there's a very high risk that those residents and their guests will be interested in finding nearby places to park. I live on Skydale, which is right abuts this place, and there's a gate through my fence. And I can imagine people parking on my street and the traffic that would cause and the congestion where I wouldn't be able to park or my own kids wouldn't be able to park. Number three, the 710 undergraduates are incompatible with the neighborhood, the people that live there, families, older people, because of things that will change so much, like the noise and the public drinking. There's a volleyball court and a swimming pool, and those
two things will be right behind my house, too. The floor plans are configured like college dorm rooms with individual bathrooms and minimal common space, so that if the project fails and those students don't fill up that place, we'll have a white elephant in our backyard. Doesn't sound like something that families will want to transition into. There is a flooding risk, I would imagine, with all that pavement back there and those tall buildings. And one of the retention ponds is also right behind my house, probably 20, 30 feet away. So all that water coming down into my backyard, I've never had a problem with flooding. I think it's stupid putting students this far away from campus. When I went to college, I walked to everything that I wanted to be involved with, my classes, my friends, the restaurants, the bars. They were all within walking distance, and out there, there's nothing. Number 7, I forgot to list my numbers before. There's no covered bicycle parking that we've heard about, so that won't be a way to encourage people to ride bikes. The project isn't really affordable when the rents start at $800 and apparently go up to $1,300 per bedroom. So one student, one bedroom, $800 to $1,300. Then there is the fact that there is that elementary school, north side, just a mile away. Kids are walking, parents are walking with them. There are buses. This is a problem morning and afternoon with all of those commuters, and the congestion is only going to increase the fears of all of the parents that they already have.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rowan and I live on 1610 Willow Lane. I'm a traffic and safety engineer, and I have 2 kids who go to the Northside School right there. So I'm not in favor of this project, and I guess I have only 2 points on my list. The first one is that project doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the city of Ann Arbor has shown lately a lot of concern in controlling greenhouse gas. And building student housing that far away from the university just doesn't make any sense with that vision that our mayor, Christopher Taylor, has expressed during the last 2 years. So that was my first point. The second is, as a traffic and safety engineer, I was very interested to check the traffic impact study that was linked to that project. And I think it was a major mistake done during the calculation of the minimum side distance for the driveway. So in that TIS, they use a posted speed of 30 miles an hour to calculate the minimum side distance. Okay, in most cases it works because the posted speed is more or less matching the 85 percentile speed, which should be used for design. And you can check the Ashton Green book, design book. It's a great reading. So in that situation, I believe a speed study should have been done. And luckily, there is actually speed data available on the STEMCOG website, and you can check. It's very easily available. So there was a count taken south of Duvaran on June 14 and 15th of 2015. And the count says that the 85 percentile speed is actually 48 miles an hour, not 30 miles an hour. So that's a major impact on the stopping distance of cars. Remember, energy is proportional to the square of the speed, so it's going to add actually 200 feet of stopping distance at that location. So what does it mean? It means that there's 400 cars a day that are going more than 50 miles an hour on that section of Pontiac Trail. So what it means is 400 times a day, you're going to have a blind spot for those cars traveling 50 miles an hour and above, and they won't be able to stop in time for a car pulling out of the driveway into Pontiac Trail. 400 times a day, you are going to have a risk of crash. So my feeling is before you even build a driveway, you need to address the speed on that corridor. 50 miles an hour is not a place for a driveway. You should have some calming measures to lower the speed limit to at least 30 miles an hour. And I'm talking the 85 percentile speed of 30 miles an hour. If you don't do that, you are going to have more crashes than you want. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the commission? Seeing no one, I will close public comment and move on to the motion. We have two motions before us this evening. If it's okay with the commission, I'll take them together. All right. Motion number one, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the cottages in Barton Green site plan and development agreement. The second motion is the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the cottages at Barton Green wetland use permit to allow filling and mitigation of 2,200 square feet of wetland and on-site mitigation. Do you have a commissioner who wants to move this? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. And we will begin discussion. Anyone? Commissioner Mills.
So first of all, again, thank you to everyone who's come out the last two meetings as well as today to talk. Thank you to the over 50 people who wrote us letters. I did read them all. I've been on Planning Commission for 3.5 years. I don't think I've ever seen a packet this deep. So you are being heard. I have, and I really appreciate what folks have pointed out. I want to share. I share in your disappointment that we don't see more housing options that were envisioned for this site that we see in the master plan. The reason that the master plan envisioned housing options is both so that we have more choice and we can have more diverse housing mix, but also so that there's some adaptability if the target market that you're going after doesn't pan out as you expect. And as I've shared in previous discussion here, I think that that may be an option that should really be considered for this site. But that vision of housing choice isn't something that we've codified in our zoning ordinance. And so that's tricky. And you will see at the end, if you stick around to the wee hours, which I expect will be here, during commission proposed business, that's something that I'm going to put on our agenda, ask to put on our agenda to consider housing choice when we meet on Monday. I've been keeping a list of the zoning changes that I'd like to see, and this is one of them. But that doesn't help tonight. So instead, what I want to talk about is the car centricity of this place. I said that weird. The extent to which it's very car centric. And I think we see that in the amount of parking around the building. And also the extent to which comments about parking in the parking lot have been addressed. Namely, the developer doesn't want to defer additional parking, where things like bicycle parking haven't been addressed. And so I think that just underscores that this is really a car-centric development. And so I think it's right that we need to consider what impact this is going to have on safety in the neighborhood. I'm curious if staff has any information on how this intersects with our Safe Routes to School program, because a couple of commenters included that in letters, and there was a map too that I thought was really interesting. I don't know who submitted this. Maybe, I don't know who submitted it. It looks like this. I'm just curious what kind of consideration we give for development in our Safe Routes to School program.
We are interested in safe pedestrian connections to schools as well as within a particular development project and along public rights of way. And in this case, we asked for and received sidewalks throughout the individual development project. We asked for and got pedestrian connections to Skydale, and we asked the developer to construct a sidewalk not over their property but over an adjacent property so that we could create a sidewalk linkage. We could eliminate a sidewalk gap along Pontiac Trail. We asked the petitioner, who agreed to provide a safe crossing of Pontiac Trail so that we can begin trying to create opportunities for pedestrians, including transit users, to get to transit stops on the east side of the site. We also asked for and received a park dedication of almost 10 acres on the west side of the site that will include pedestrian pathways that we hope ultimately will get people down toward the river and other open spaces, so that folks who are interested in recreating in these green areas won't have to drive there or get onto Pontiac Trail. They can walk in a back road manner, so to speak. So we believe that the petitioner has done everything that we've asked for in terms of providing safe pedestrian linkages and safe pedestrian connections, which I believe are entirely consistent with the Safe Routes to School program that currently exists.
Okay. Apart from Safe Routes to School, there's been traffic analyses that have been done. To what extent is there an intersection between the traffic studies that have been done and pedestrian safety? Do we have information on what either vehicle movements, how that intersects with pedestrian and cyclist safety?
I'm going to speak to that, but then I'm going to ask the representative from Midwestern Consulting, which is the firm that conducted the traffic study, to speak in more detail about that. When we do look at traffic issues, we are looking at traffic volumes, which relate to traffic congestion. We are also looking for traffic safety issues, which include non-motorized users. We do take into consideration things like bike paths, bike lanes, pedestrian crossings, and that sort of thing. I'm going to ask Scott Betzel if he wouldn't mind articulating on that answer and maybe getting to the core of your question.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Betzel. I'm civil engineer site planning this project. As far as traffic safety goes, the traffic study that is done and the requirements generally hinge upon intersection capacity of vehicles. Certain characteristics are identified as being unsafe for pedestrians or cyclists if they are particularly lacking. In this particular case, none of the intersections that we analyzed were lacking in signalized crossings, or they're lacking in bike lanes, but that's probably actually okay in this particular case, because bike lanes can sometimes be a safety hazard at an intersection. So we did not identify any particular increases in situational problems associated with this increase in traffic. You have to remember that Pontiac Trail is currently handling almost 7,000 cars a day, with background traffic of the already approved developments that's under construction that's going to go up to about 8,500 vehicles a day. This project is going to put less than 200 vehicle trips during the peak hour on the roads, so it's not a significant increase in traffic. I mean, we've got 3 intersections that we analyzed, and the increase in traffic due to this project ranged from 2% to 8%. So it's not an incredible increase. It is an increase, but there was no deficiencies in pedestrian or bicycle safety that were identified at any of the 3 intersections that we studied.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm imagining that there's other commissioners that may take up the safety issue again, and since Mr. Betzel kind of slid into traffic impacts, that's the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So I encourage other people to talk about safety. But on the traffic impacts, I hearing from folks here, I recognize that there's already traffic, that the traffic study shows that your level of service is failing. I have to give final grades in a week. Like, D, E, and Fs are not what my students want to see, and it's already failing. This is, it is adding, maybe it's a drop in the bucket to the bucket, but the bucket is already full. So there is something within our code that talks about what happens when you're proposing development in an area where the level of service is already a D, E, and F. And there's, my understanding, this is for staff, that there's been consideration given to the intersection of Pontiac Trail and Barton, a monetary contribution to improve that. Is that correct?
Yeah, as part of the proposed development, they are proposing some mitigation dollars for that. I don't have details yet from our traffic engineers of what the exact timeline. I know that's something that that we had discussed previously. We've had some preliminary conversations. I don't think those plans are finalized yet. So if that's something that you needed more information on, we would certainly need to follow up with that.
Yeah, I think that that's really important because at least as I read the code, it says, until such a time as necessary street or traffic improvements are scheduled for construction. And so if we don't have them, if it's not, I don't think it's on the CIP yet. That's the capital improvements program, which is kind of where we're going to do major repaving, major intersection repairs, lots of different projects. That's something that Planning Commission does review every year. And so that's not on there, right?
My recollection is that there's some adjacent work, but not to that specific intersection.
Got it. So that means it's not scheduled yet. So I think that we at least need to know when it's scheduled. But beyond that intersection, there are service degradations at other intersections that I think, I'm curious about why those have not been addressed here. Do you know what the MO is on that?
I'm afraid I don't. I think the most significant impact discussed in our traffic engineers review, which I apologize we're not able to be here this evening, were to the Barton and Pontiac Trail intersection. I think that was much of the analysis from both, the opportunities there to improve that intersect as you were talking about of both the background and forecasted increase in traffic at that intersection from a vehicular perspective. Again, and I apologize, I'll take some responsibility for not a better answer. We have had some of those preliminary conversations, but in short, I just don't think the city's answers to that fix is focused yet. The traffic study presented does recommend some proposed changes to that, and we discussed that. I don't know that in a short time I could get them to a more definitive design. I think there were questions about right-of-way impacts to that intersection. It's not at that design stage, but I can certainly try to provide more information to you to the extent they can.
Thank you. And I think at the very least, schedule is important, but also understanding like what's the schedule for these other intersections, because especially, it looks like, clearly there's lots going on that particular side of town, but Broadway and Maiden Lane, if the intersection is going from an E to an F, like that's, I think F is as low as it goes. Is that, I don't know, is that true? Is F as low as it goes?
I believe that's true.
Okay. Just want to make sure. So if we don't have those answers tonight, then I need them before I feel like I can vote in good consciousness on this.
So I want to be clear. A little bit more refinement on the capital improvement planning effort, both for this intersection as well as some of the other sections where mitigation dollars aren't necessarily tied to yet. Just what is the long-term plans for those? And again, I guess I just want to be realistic. I don't know how quickly we will get to a specific design solution in those circumstances, but at a minimum, I can try to provide you some of that detail about what the long-term plans are, or if they have any sort of preliminary designs.
Yeah, well, and from my perspective, at least like looking into code, I see when they're scheduled for construction. So my guess is that not all of the details are known to satisfy me. I don't think that has, I don't need to know all the nitty-gritties, but the schedule I think is the really important part. The other thing that I didn't anticipate, but this is again why your public comments are so very important, is the comment that this gentleman made about the 85th percentile speed that was used in the traffic study. Not used, right. The assumption not being necessarily what the best data has. I'm happy to let Mr. Betzel respond to that, but also I would like to hear what the city engineer has to say about that as well. Do you want to talk about like what speed was used in order to understand my understanding is, like where the blind spots are coming over that hill?
Well, you're comparing apples and oranges. We didn't do a speed study. And
Okay.
A speed study is done primarily to determine what to post the speed at. And what that does is it monitors the speed that people are driving, and the 85th percentile is what people feel comfortable driving. The road is actually posted to artificially lower that speed. And what this gentleman had discovered is people are going faster. It's an enforcement issue. It's not anything more than that. It has nothing to do with intersection capacity or the additional traffic.
Sure.
It's apples and oranges. I mean, I guess the easiest way to.
Got it.
So.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
Thanks for explaining kind of how that all fits into a traffic study, since the traffic engineer isn't here today. I think kind of knowing from the traffic perspective then, but knowing about this speed and how it affects stopping distance, it may not be a traffic, level of service question as much as a safety question. And can you safely turn out of the development? So I would like their take on that. Forgive me, has that specifically been addressed already?
I don't know the answer to that. Mr. Betzel knows more about it than I do. I can say that I know from other professional experience often that is accurate, that the 85th percentile is used to set speeds. Often it's a point of consternation of communities where communities do want to arbitrarily, if you will, reduce speed to try and encourage safety. But I would have to get further information from our engineers to the extent that it should be considered in the report, or if it has.
Thank you. Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibrandal.
I just want to follow up on that really quickly. If Mr. Betzel could address this. Is the site distance issue a topographical issue in terms of the hill being in the way, or is a site distance issue a vegetation blocking the site distance? Like, what is possible here in terms of, because obviously the reality of people racing down there is you're going downhill, people are going from posted speed that's a lot faster, and then suddenly having to slow down. And I mean, my office is over there. I see this happening constantly, and it's hard to not do it because you're just going down the hill, and and so. But I do feel like we should be addressing the reality too, not necessarily the theoretical. And so I guess what I'm wondering is how much flexibility is there in terms of what you actually can see? Is it because the ground form is in the way, or is it because there's just a bunch of buckthorn up near the edge of the road and it has to be cut back?
I would suggest that this gentleman probably took into account the brush, and there is a hill to the north. Yeah, it's a crest. Right. It's a crest. Right. So, I mean, when people are coming southbound is what you're speaking of.
Northbound, actually, northbound is the most. You have like 368 feet outside distance.
I don't remember that. Northbound, you can see almost down to the river. It's all going downhill. Northbound is the shortest one. So,
according to your study,
actually. Yeah. The traffic coming from the north presents the biggest challenge. Right. But it exceeds the requirements. And so I don't have anything to say about what people are driving it at. Once again, I mean, it's an enforcement issue. But I don't know, this gentleman apparently did a speed study of some kind.
I did not, but SEMCOG did.
Okay.
And it's available on the website.
And where did SEMCOG get their data from? At what point? I mean, but they didn't take it at our driveway, I'm guessing.
Right,
it wasn't just lucky.
This isn't a conversation. This is a conversation with us.
So what I'm saying is I'm sure it wasn't taken at our driveway exactly at the spot that we're considering. So I can't address the information that I don't have all the details on. So.
Commissioner Briggs.
So I think a number of, as I've wrestled sort of with this project, and again, I really appreciate all the comment that has come in on this. There are some issues of what the existing conditions are in this area, and then, and then the issue of this proposed project and its appropriateness for this area and how it might contribute to the traffic conditions. So regarding the 85th percentile, to weigh in on that question a little bit, I mean, certainly that is it's an interesting way that we set speeds, and that we don't set them at, we have a posted speed limit, and then we look at what 85th percentile are doing, and so if that's 40 miles an hour, we say, oh, or 45 miles an hour, we should just raise the speed limit. And that is a design issue that we're discussing. We cannot, enforcement is a very challenging way to lower the speeds. And so the question this raises for me, in part, is a question for city staff in terms of our response to development in areas. So what I heard from the city engineers at the last meeting is that our mitigation for the traffic issues were to potentially widen the intersection at Barton Drive and Pontiac Trail, which we see as a perk because we already know that intersection is failing. And there, I'm sure that many folks in the community would actually appreciate seeing that intersection improved. However, I don't see that as a long-term benefit to the neighborhood. I mean, we have, regardless of this project, we're going to have tons of people coming in. Traffic is slow. It's going to continue to be slow. So what we want to see moving along that corridor are bicyclists, pedestrians, and transit. I disagree with Mr. Betzel's comment that bike lanes can be a hazard at intersections. Certainly the way that we create them is, but if we do them in a more progressive way where there's maybe bike boxes and we move bicyclists through the intersection more efficiently than we do currently, that would be beneficial. And I don't see our traffic engineers suggesting anything in terms of improving bicycle movement along that corridor. And I see that as problematic as our own city response of what we're asking for in terms of along this corridor. So I have that problem with this in some ways. But my bigger issue for tonight in terms of traffic is that we are proposing this project simply, it's student population, and we know that they are all going to have to go multiple miles to where they're going. It is necessarily going to increase the safety issues for that neighborhood. We don't seem to be mitigating it well. We don't seem to be asking for design recommendations that are going to assist with that. So I'll move on to another topic. I may jump in on another issue later on, but I wanted to weigh in on that in terms of traffic.
Commissioner Trudeau.
I would also like to thank everybody for all of the public input. I also did read through all of your letters, and it generated a lot of questions. So thank you all for participating and giving us all this feedback. And thanking my fellow commissioners for articulating a lot of the questions I've also had. Just to jump back to the housing options question, I was really unsatisfied with the petitioner's response to what I think we were recommending. We have heard requests from people for single-family detached homes. I don't think that's what we were all on this side of the table primarily talking about, which was the high bedroom counts and the adaptability of the unit configurations over the long term. That said, I think ultimately we are operating in the constraints of our ordinances, and our ordinances don't say anything about things like bedroom counts. And so it's something I'm hope that's the kind of thing we'll be looking at. Unfortunately, I don't think we can apply that to this project. But I also have a lot of questions about the safety impacts tied to the traffic analysis. And I had some questions for our traffic engineer last time around what the plans were for the Barton and Pontiac Trail intersection. And I'm still, I share Commissioner Mills' questions about when is that going to be on the schedule? What does that look like? Can staff describe a little bit what the decision-making process is for what we decide is an improvement? And I gave Luke a little bit of grief over the word improvement last time, and that making traffic flow more quickly may be an improvement for people in cars coming from the north. It may actually be a detriment to people crossing that intersection on their way to Northside School. Now they have a longer intersection to walk, so it's an improvement. It's only an improvement depending on your perspective. But anyway, you talk a little bit about the decision-making process there and what that?
Yeah. I can take a stab at that,
Yeah.
and maybe Brett wants to jump in after I'm through. As I think everyone knows, traffic really is in fact increasing all over the city. We're a city that is creating over 1,000 new jobs a year. Some of those jobs are filled by folks in town. Many of those jobs are filled by folks elsewhere. And that doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. So this is an issue that is affecting all major corridors in Ann Arbor, including Pontiac Trail and Barton and all. So with regard to your question, we do have a capital improvements plan that tries to stay ahead of some of these transportation issues. As Brett alluded to, currently the intersection improvement for Barton, Green, and Pontiac Trail has not been included in the CIP. It's our understanding that it will be soon. I can say that we, meaning planning staff, has been in communication with our public services staff, which happens to be the folks who do all these transportation projects, about this issue. And they were particularly interested in exploring the possibility of incremental improvements to the intersection, which means instead of waiting until you have a huge chunk of money to do a comprehensive improvement or a comprehensive expansion.
Thanks.
Might there be some things that could help alleviate some of the most stressed segments? For instance, is it possible to get a new right turn lane or a new left turn lane to try to relieve some of that congestion? And so they happen to be very interested in this issue. They do recognize that this is a stressed intersection. The corridor is receiving more and more traffic volumes, just like all the other corridors in town. And so they are in the process of considering potential improvements and potential processes related to those improvements. And the CIP would be one of those steps. But we're still fairly early in that process. We, meaning city staff, is fairly early in the process. I don't think, if your expectation is in 2 weeks we're going to have a completely redesigned intersection, I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that Public Services is keenly aware of this issue. And Public Services did ask for a contribution from the petitioner to to make modifications to that intersection to improve safety and potentially improve traffic flow. And the petitioner was willing to make that contribution.
Right, and I think, and again, my concern around that orientation of making improvement of traffic flow a goal is that it could be working contrary to goals of safety and contrary to some of the point Commissioner Briggs made, which is encouraging people into other modes. Because if we just make traffic flow a little bit better, all we're going to do is attract more traffic, trying to avoid the traffic on 23 coming from outside of the city. I'd like to, anyway, and yeah, so those are my concerns there, and I sort of share the question of when is this going to happen? What does it look like? And that we didn't really have answers for today. Also, just sort of on a tangent, so people are aware, the Transportation Commission did make a recommendation to City Council to change the way we think about setting speed limits. So instead of using the standard 85th percentile rule, moving to a safe design systems approach. And that's kind of gone to council, and we'll see where that goes. But that essentially looks at the city deciding what are the speeds we want to see here, and then how do we need to design the road to encourage drivers to drive the speed we want them to drive, rather than so making it not just an enforcement issue of like, oh, the road feels really wide, so everybody wants to drive 50. Like, if we want people to go slower, we should be designing the road so it doesn't feel comfortable to drive fast, which again is neither here nor there with where we are today. But that is, if that's a concern of yours, I do encourage you to contact your city council members to move that recommendation forward.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So, again, on the traffic, one of the things with this project is the shuttle service. And to me, and I mentioned this the last time, the shuttle service kind of is a big red flag for me, because it's kind of to me, it's a signal that they understand that what they're putting there is not going to fit within the norms of the city, the current bus system, current traffic. And I have some questions. It's really hard to run a personal transit system, and I think some of the reviews from other Trinitas developments have shown that the shuttle system is not always the preferred mode of transit. But I do have a question, and maybe this is for Mr. Betzold. If you could.
I feel like this is a dollar dance.
I know, yeah. Up again. So when you look at trips taken, how is that done, especially for, say, a student population? I think, you can kind of understand for most people might leave their house sometime between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning and come back between 4 and 6, or is kind of a norm. Do you have certain numbers for a different population, or?
No, that's part of the problem. The model actually conservatively predicts more trips than generally occur with a student population. What we did in this particular case is with an agreement with the city's traffic engineer, in-house traffic engineer, and the traffic consultant, they agreed on a discounted rate. Normally, I think the normal standard is that if this was an apartment complex of working young adults or what have you, I think they predict that 93% of them are going to go to work. So that's the population that's leaving in the morning and returning in the afternoon. And I don't know what the factor that they agreed upon adding to this to be a student population, but they just added some percentage off. They said, okay, like 75%, or I think it was 74% or 76% are going to leave in the morning and come back. But what the model can't do is recognize the fact that they're not all leaving at 7 o'clock, and they're not all coming back at 5:30. Students, we all remember, right? I mean, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you had an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. On Tuesday and Thursday, you may not go to campus until 11 o'clock. But on that day, you came home at 5 o'clock, and the other days you were done at 2 o'clock. So the distribution is wide. I mean, to be very honest with you, this is the best traffic situation you could possibly have for this site, or the site North Sky to the south. I mean, you've got this wide distribution of departures and arrivals. You have a transit that is going to take people to and from the center of campus, which we think is going to be, we think we've underestimated how much it's going to be used. Because even if you consider AATA, to ride that, they go on a circuitous route with many stops. You can get in this transit and go from here to Central Campus or here to North Campus in a lot quicker time period. And then you also have the fact that with this particular development, 80% of your people are going to evaporate for 4 months out of the year. So you really can't get a better traffic situation than this. And the traffic study has overestimated the number of trips through the intersections because it cannot because it focuses on the peak hour in the morning and the afternoon, and it can't, there's no model to distribute that mode of transportation throughout the day. None exists right now, so.
Okay.
I probably went on a tangent. Did I answer your question?
Yep, you gave me something to work with anyway.
All right.
So I do live in an area with lots of students. And in the last few years, there has been an enormous change in the traffic pattern. And that is because of Uber and Lyft. And what's ended up happening is, although students may not take their own car back and forth because parking's expensive and all that, they take Uber and Lyft constantly. And with each of those, each trip in one of those services doubles your trips because the car has to get there and then come back, and then the car has to go and come back. And so we've actually noticed a lot more kind of round trip traffic. My guess is it's not reflected anywhere because it's so new. It's something that concerns me with this population because I don't worry that they're going to drive drunk, because I can tell you these kids do not want to drink and drive, but they will absolutely call an Uber, absolutely, and they will do it repeatedly and often. And so that, for me, when we're talking a 2 to 8% traffic increase depending on the intersection and the time, and that's a lot. And I don't know that we've captured all the trips, because I know, as I said, I've seen it. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future when we have self-driving cars, which probably isn't that far away. That also generates a lot of trips. So we really need to focus a lot on things like the AAATA, and but there's still going to be a lot of trips generated from this population who has kind of jumped on that new form of transportation in a big way. When we talk about this, when we vote on these, it will not cause a public or private nuisance and will not have a detrimental effect on public health, safety, or welfare. And I don't know that I can confidently say that it won't cause a nuisance. I don't know that any of us can say that. We know that the numbers say that there will be a reduction in services, and I think it's difficult to say, yes, we can do this, because we have approved some developments, and we are seeing the effects of those developments now. And I know we've approved Broadway in part because those trips are so close, and we know that people can walk to the hospital and and it was a concern there. This is, kind of we're starting up higher and increasing problems throughout the system. I just think it's difficult for me to see that this would not increase the nuisance. I also think in the report, and maybe this is for the petitioner, if you have, on the, let's see if I can find, the discussion about where the shuttle bus will let off are Pierpont Commons and the Central Campus on North University. Have you discussed that with the university? Have there been discussions? And
yes, we have started those discussions. We also had discussions with some of our competitors that are also using similar stops for similar shuttle services at those locations.
So, like which?
The Yard, for example, was one.
Okay. So they're pretty close to campus. Do they do a North Campus?
I believe they do 2 routes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that those areas are in high demand, And I know that the university doesn't give away space easily
Sure.
for those.
Sure, I'm sure times would have to be coordinated. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I'm grateful that the petitioner is offering to contribute $346,000 towards the improvements that we're seeing, I do hear Commissioner Mills' points, or rather the citation of our code that calls it a change or a degradation to traffic impacts at an intersection with respect to a project to require that we know when those scheduled improvements are going to be. And hearing that and us not having that schedule in front of us, I think it'd be most prudent to call for a postponement of this issue. So I'd make that motion if there's a second.
Motion moved and seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. Do we have further discussion? Mr. Leonard.
I guess from my lens, this petition's been postponed a couple of times. I guess this is obviously dependent on us getting some information from traffic engineers, but I'd like to keep the postponement as short as possible if that's the avenue you go in. Perhaps postpone it to the May 1st meeting, which would be the earliest available meeting. And I guess I'd also like to kind of confirm, it seems like I've got some questions and follow-up on traffic and capital improvements issues and perhaps a little bit visibility, safe routes to school. What I'm hearing from the dialogue is it seems that there was a wider kind of range of issues addressed previously. It seems like most of the discussion now is focused on traffic and circulation. Am I correct in that assumption?
Commissioner Gabrandel.
I also, though, would like to follow up on Commissioner Trudeau's point about the housing type, because I feel like what was addressed in the response was not really where the commission was coming from in terms of the kind of, we weren't necessarily thinking single-family homes with a bunch of lawn around them. It's more like they can be multifamily homes, but that they're more adaptable to future use besides 6 bedrooms with each having a bath. And it's difficult because I don't know that that's what we can have any jurisdiction over, if we have any power over that or not. And so, but that's actually my main concern, actually, is that. And I have traffic concerns too, but that in my heart of hearts, that's actually the thing that is bothering me the most, is this particular use in this particular place, which I feel like is kind of fundamentally incompatible, or it's a forced fit, and it just doesn't seem right to me. But I don't know that our code lets us have any flexibility with that. But I feel like the response in terms of the petitioner's comments really wasn't getting at what we were looking for. And so I would look forward to a more thorough response about some sort of flexibility, not necessarily just single family, but how to think about it as something that isn't such a narrow type of housing for the future. So I guess I would really like to see that addressed in a more full way. And again, I don't know what our options are around that, but it's that's the thing I'm struggling with.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, I appreciate the I would be interested in hearing the responses that the traffic engineering has to the questions that have been raised. However, I guess I would be surprised if the responses that they could provide would make me feel more comfortable with this project. Fundamentally, I think this is a flawed project that, one, is detrimental to the safety of the neighborhood from a traffic standpoint, but that could happen fairly from a lot of different projects. And I want to, that is, I think part of it is our own city response in terms of what we expect out of projects in terms of mitigation. in where that mitigation should be. And I hear Mr. Betzel's response in terms of this may be the best distribution that you could expect in some ways of people leaving at different times. You know, there's maybe a bigger, you know, there actually is direct transit, there is that piece of things. But fundamentally, another project of density of this level would not, for 710 bedrooms, need 500. Hopefully, we would not require 559 surface parking lots. It's because of that individual per bedroom rental proposal that we're seeing this sort of completely car-centric proposal. And so without that change in kind of design that makes it more flexible and attractive to a variety of different sort of populations, including students, which would be fine. I haven't heard the neighborhood suggest anything, you know, necessarily against students or against, you know, affordable housing or, you know, anything. But this design, you know, by the per bedroom is, I also think.
Commissioner Briggs, if we can just
There's
stay
one, yeah, and I'm
to-
sorry, I'll go to the one other thing of why I think this is, fundamentally, I think this is, you know, from the public health and safety welfare, thinking about our plan, this is a project that is not healthy for the neighborhood. It fundamentally, in my opinion, does not add to the neighborhood in a way that will, is sustainable from a long-term perspective. And I know that those are words that we need to use carefully. But I think all the comments we've received on this over multiple months, I think people are right, and I can't vote for this project. So I don't want to suggest that if I get more information from the traffic engineers that, you know, it tells me more about what the redesign of that intersection is going to look like, that I can support this.
Thank you. So I'm going to vote against postponement. And the reason I'm going to vote against postponement is because no more information is going to help me in making my decision that this is not the right project, and this is a safety nightmare because I travel through this corridor on a very regular basis, and this is just not the right project. So I will vote against postponement for that reason, because I'm ready to vote, and I don't know that, actually I do know. Any additional information from the traffic engineer isn't going to help me, isn't going to change my mind. So any other comments before we vote on the postponement? Seeing that we're going to have a interesting vote here, I will ask for a roll call on the postponement. This is on the postponement only.
All right, so this is to postpone to May 1st. Is that a friendly? Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs?
No.
Commissioner Gibrandel? Yes. Commissioner Mills?
Yes.
Commissioner Melstein?
No.
Commissioner Trudeau?
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby?
No.
The motion passes.
Thank you. This is postponed until May 1st. All right, moving on to regular business. And I'll just give it a quick minute. All right, so moving on. Before us, and if I can ask everyone to please quiet down as you exit. Moving on to our next, into regular business, 10A, Game Day Condominium Site Plan. And we will start with a staff report with Mr. Chang. Welcome.
Thank you. This site is located on the southwest corner of South Main Street in Berkeley. There is an existing 1,300 square foot house that was built in the early 1920s, I believe. It is used as office. It's 2-story. The zoning to the north is parking. To the west is single family. To the south is also office, and it's a little cut out, but to the east is U of M Stadium. I'm going to come back to that slide. The petitioner proposes a 4-unit, 4-story condominium building. It will be accessed off of Berkeley with the existing 2 curb cuts. It will be a one-way drive. The green dot is a 19-inch maple landmark tree that is proposed to be saved. It's to the south of the building. There will be conflicting land use buffers to the south and to the west, as this site is adjacent to residential uses to the south and to the west. Stormwater detention is located under the drive. These are pervious pavers. It is detaining for the first flush rain event, as the site is less than 10,000 square feet. The 4-story building consists of approximately 6,800 square feet, with the parking located below the units. Sidewalks do come off from South Main and from Berkeley, connecting to this site. It's probably not the best elevations. I think the previous one's a little better. We can refer to these if we need the south, the north elevations. I believe the petitioner may have some color elevations, but I will go back so you can get a better look. This is taken from the intersection of South Main and Berkeley. Again, here you can see a look. You can see the U of M Stadium looking to the east. There's parking here, and you can see the adjacent residential that's to the south. Again, another look. This is looking from Berkeley. One of the existing curb cuts that will be used is a one-way entrance. This will be the exit. Again, this was taken from South Main Street. I wanted to show this. There's the landmark tree. I think I may even have a close-up. This is the gap between the existing residential uses to the south and the current building that's proposed to be demolished. Maybe I thought I had it. There we go. There was another slide in there. This is what the conflicting land use buffer, which will increase that side setback with landscaping. We did receive communication from the neighbor in opposition to air conditioning units being located in this 15-foot wide conflicting land use buffer. The petitioner did move 2 of the units. They are on the side, and I can go back and it might be a little easier to see on the site plan. Not easy to see, but they were moved to this side. The existing or the proposed 2 air conditioning units in the conflicting land use will be screened by a fence and along with pine trees that are part of the landscaping as part of the conflicting land use buffer. I did speak with a mechanical inspector from the Ann Arbor Building Department regarding the location of the air conditioning units. He did confirm that anything more than 50 feet running a line would probably, in fact said, would void the warranty. He would not recommend running a line that long. In fact, it would cause more stress on the compressor, which would actually make the air conditioning unit louder. So as far as the location of the air conditioning unit, it seems from the mechanical inspector's perspective, and he did say, I've installed thousands of these, it's an appropriate location. He did also say that there are plenty of brands, in fact, all of them make what he would call a soft sound model that would have a lower decibel rating, and with that, he believes with that fence and the landscaping, it'd be very negligible that you would actually hear the actual air conditioning unit. So I just wanted to report that as part of the staff report. There may be additional questions for myself or for the petitioner. Staff does recommend approval of this petition, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. We will now begin with our public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, we will close the public comment and move on to discussion. Or actually, first we'll have a motion. All right. The motion states, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Game Day Condos site plan. Do you have a commissioner that wants to move? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal, and we will begin discussion now. Commissioner Gibrandal.
Jumping into some minutia here, is there a petitioner's agent here? I noticed that your, the area that you're going to be planting trees along Berkeley is 3.5 feet wide, which seems kind of incompatible to tree growth success over time. I realize it's next to pervious pavement, but I'm just wondering if there are some other kinds of plans you have for how you're planting those trees to be able to try to ensure that they are going to actually grow.
Well, we did work this out with the landscape department at the city. We're right now coming close to the minimum drive width, which we have. So we did change our drive enough to get that tree inside there. But there's no other movement I can make in terms of the site plan without actually reducing the building.
So if I could suggest a potential strategy here, there are systems called structural soil, which have the pervious pavement in the area closest to the edge actually coated in a tackified topsoil. That's what's used for many of the street trees out in front of City Hall right now, so that they have some access to topsoil. So it may be that there's a way to have a strip that is closer to those trees, so they actually have some access to a little bit more of a growing media while still allowing the water to be able to flow through that area too. It would allow you to keep your drive width, but would give those trees a little bit of help in an otherwise pretty tough situation. I know street trees are something that we all really like to have around here, and I think if you're going to plant them, then you might as well try to do it in a way that allows them to be able to have a chance to succeed. And I think 3.5 feet wide is pretty tight, and I would imagine that our city forester was going for the best that she could get, given what the constraints are of what the drives are, and was willing to go for something's better than nothing, but perhaps there's a way to have a little bit of flexibility there to be able to give the trees a chance. So I don't think this holds anything up. It's just that perhaps there's a way to be able to work that in through the next phase of approvals.
What was that system called again?
Structural soil. I can give you specifics.
Anyone? Anyone else? Commissioner Weatherby.
So can you go to the building, like the actual, the new plan, sorry.
Okay. The elevations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So could you explain a little bit how this works? If it's a 4-unit, are there individual doors to the units?
Sure. If you can see to the right of that tree, there's 2 kind of white spots, but those are wooden glass doors. Those walk into a little vestibule and then up a stair.
So is there like 2 units through each door?
Yeah, every unit has its own door.
Okay. So I see, I think 2 on this side. Are there?
2 farther down to the right.
So those aren't double, each unit, it's a single door just next to each other?
Single door next to each other, and then
Goes up
a double garage door
Okay.
for each.
And then there's no underground parking or inside?
That is the garage. You pull in right there. That is the garage space.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, got that. So one, and people have heard me say this before, I live on Main Street, and as these houses, the existing houses are being demolished and replaced with these things, what's being lost is Main Street. And there's no sidewalk connection to the front door. There's no front door. You've moved the orientation to Berkeley. And interestingly, in this case, these will all look out over a parking lot, not the stadium, which is sort of interesting, although you'll obviously be able to see the stadium from there. I think it's an interesting choice. I don't hate the design. It certainly is not compatible with other things, but that's not necessarily bad. I don't love the existing remodeling of the 1920s house that's there. Those columns were not original. But I just have to say that I really am disappointed that there is no Main Street on this, what was formerly a Main Street address, that now will kind of turn its back on Main Street. And I just have to register that. And I know you will smile politely and say, okay.
No, we took a look at that, and we did increase the amount of glass and how we went on that Main Street frontage. Our idea about it is really the walkability and even though we need garages, that whole front area being pavers would be more or less a plaza area for these people to walk up to their house and not just have a definition of the concrete walkway and the pavers. We kind of wanted it to all be one space. And that's how that developed. And because the lot is fairly narrow, especially with the 15-foot buffer and then the setback off of the two streets, we didn't have much left to be able to come in the front door and get to the units.
It's just, although there is a lot of game day in the year, the majority of it is not game day, and the majority of it is its Main Street. And I personally would rather look out at the stadium than that parking lot, but, to each his own. And I'm sure, given the location, you'll be able to sell these without a problem. But I just have to register that not having even a front door on Main Street is very disappointing to me. I think that's a unfortunate design choice. Thanks.
Commissioner Trudeau.
As the other planning commissioner who lives on Main Street, I'll just just take another chance to complain about that. Because this is not the first project that's done this on Main Street, and it's like, yeah. And I have recognized the constraints, and and I actually don't mind the design overall, other than its relationship with the street and that street level. Like, I appreciate what you're trying to do with the pavers, and I think that's an improvement over a normal driveway, but just garage doors on the street with some doors right up against with no stoop or entryway or anything, like, I mean, it's nothing I can point to an ordinance and say it violates the ordinance or anything like that, but I'll just register my complaints on the aesthetics there as well. I don't, yeah.
Commissioner Mills.
So this is really a question for staff on what is allowed in the conflicting land use buffer, because I know the last public hearing, we heard something about a dumpster located within the conflicting land use buffer. So can you just tell us all kind of what is typically okay there?
So zoning code would allow for mechanical equipment in the side and the rear setback. But looking through the conflicting land use buffer code, it's silent. It doesn't mention it. I will tell you, I did a little bit of research. I've looked at quite a few similar types of development. There are air conditioning units in the conflicting land use buffer. I got pictures on my cell phone. If you'd like to see them, I can even name the projects if you'd like. And some of them are quite close to this one, right on Davis in South Main. So we do have a case where we have permitted those in the past through the conflicting land use buffer review.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the moving of the one set of units to the north, or to, I guess that's the west side. Like, I think that's great. I know that you probably want to be a good neighbor too. The information from who did you talk to? The building inspector about this?
A mechanical inspector, yes.
Yes, the quiet sound, the soft sound. Is that something that you're considering or that you would consider just to keep the peace?
Absolutely. After we discussed this with the city, we looked into moving all four, but the front two, it didn't work. So we immediately moved the rear two, and then we looked into using a train unit with their quiet set, which is roughly between 53 and 57 decibels. Out there right now, when we metered it just recently, ambient noise out there is about 53. Our discussion here is 60. So they've come a long way, and that's what it's meant for. And, we don't want that sound either. So, in understanding that, and we understand that there's a neighbor that is very concerned about that, we took all that into consideration.
Thank you. I think, it's tiny, so I can't quite see. Do you know if it's closer to, is it closer to the property line or closer to the building?
Oh, the air conditioning unit is much closer to the building. It's difficult to see up here,
Okay.
but it is in this area, so you've got the landscaping there, the 15-foot buffer, and the other two units, as you can see, that's at the corner.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can't see even with my contacts in, so. I appreciate that, and I think that that's putting it, if it's allowed in the landscape buffer, you could put it anywhere, but putting it closest to your building is, I appreciate that. And using a quiet equipment, and there's a noise ordinance too, to remind people of. So, that's not something that we have jurisdiction over, but something that if neighbors are concerned, the neighbors who are listening, if you're concerned about the air conditioning units on your neighbor's property too, look into the noise ordinance. So.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, one,
Microphone.
I'm confused with this being office, and why it's residential.
So our office zoning does allow for residential, and it can follow the office zoning requirements. So it does allow for different setbacks, different heights, more floor area than it would be if it were zoned, say, single or multifamily residential. So they are complying with the office district zoning requirements, but they do also allow for multiple family residential.
Okay, I didn't realize that was fully in. And then secondly, the placement of the driveway appears to be particularly close to Main Street, and I'm looking at the existing curb cuts in the proposed. It looks like there are currently 2 driveways.
That's correct.
Off of Berkeley, and now there's just going to be 1?
There's still 2 curb cuts. There'll be a one-way looping system through, if I go back, you can see this will be one-way entrance, and as you're exiting out there, they're using the existing curb cuts.
Okay. Wouldn't we want to close up that curb cut that is closest to Main Street for traffic safety purposes?
You could, but they do meet the minimum length of lot frontage that does allow for 2 curb cuts.
Have the traffic engineers looked at this?
Yes, they have, and they have
they-
approved.
I know. I'm surprised that we approved that. That seems not with what I understanding is good design. Anyway, and then the final piece is that I appreciate what Commissioner Gibrandel discussed in terms of trees. I wonder, I don't see much, it seems like I too wish that there was some sort of frontage on Main Street, since there isn't, and anybody who walks down there sees right now is kind of a brick wall. I wonder if there's a way to soften that a little bit through some landscaping, just some bushes or something along that wall that's facing Main Street, if that's something you've considered at all.
Sure, we would consider more. We haven't done a total foundation plan yet, which would be the more of the planting that would be curb appeal for the building rather than just meeting the ordinance standards.
Yeah, because I think that might at least soften the feel, at least on Main Street. So those are my thoughts on this.
We ready for a vote? Looks like it. All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to Bloom City Club Special Exemption Use and Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval. And we'll start with a staff report. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Kowalski.
Another planner. You get a 3-4 today. Changing up on you guys. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Bloom City Club is here tonight requesting approval for a special exception use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. The subject parcel you can see here on your maps, 423 Miller. On the left is obviously the aerial photo. You can see the subject site. To the right is the zoning. The site is zoned D2, which is the downtown interface zoning district. So here's basically an Alta site survey. They're proposing no changes to the site as it stands currently. The building's approximately 900 square feet that will be used for the provisioning center. You can see there is a it is within the D2 within the D2 zoning district. It is a parking exempt zone, so they are not required to have any parking. And because there are no physical improvements proposed for the project, it does not trigger site plan improvements such as stormwater detention, landscaping, and so forth. Again, here's a photo from the subject site. So in reviewing the petition, planning staff just had noted a couple of concerns with the project. One would be not the bicycle parking, but the vehicular parking in the front. As you can see actually from this photo and from the aerial photos when you look, there are vehicles that are parked in front of the facility and you can tell obviously it was a former gas station type of use service center, so there are doors there which are not, I don't think they're operable at this time, but they're not used for obviously vehicle transportation in and out of the building. So that was a concern noted by planning staff. In addition, actually, that was the one concern. There is bicycle parking that has been installed. My staff report notes that it is to be installed. However, it has been installed. It is located in the rear of the building. So just a little laser pointer, but if we can see. So it's kind of right here, directly to the rear of the building. I've just requested that they put some signage out front directing basically people to know where the bicycle parking is located. And really at this time, that really concludes the staff report. Again, and staff is recommending approval of the petition contingent upon the removal of the 2 parking spaces located at the front of the business along Miller Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now open up public comment on this petition. Is there anyone in the audience? Yes, please. If you can please step up. State your name and address for the record, and then at some point, sign in.
Hello, my name is Scott Newell. I own the building across the street from Bloom, 500 Miller, and I own the business that rents there, Big City Small World Bakery. I just wanted to have some comments here. So I've been a retail anchor along with Knights on the corner of Miller and Spring since '02. They've been there a little bit longer than me. And we represent small owner-operated retail community of businesses there at that corner. And I urge this body to grant the variance that Bloom seeks. And I'll tell you why. The corner of Miller and Spring marks the southeast corner of Waterhill. And I believe the western edge, well, I guess you had just defined it, the western edge of the downtown business district. Yet the area near Miller and Spring has always had blight historically, and it's because of the old zone. There's still an empty building on the northeast corner, or the northeast side of the train trestle. It looks like hell. It's been there forever. You know, of course, this is because of the mixed use and zoning of the area. Bloom has taken an old gas station, a brownfield really, and turned it green, literally, figuratively, and economically. And Bloom has cleaned up that part of the Miller Corridor, helped to do that, contributed to it. They've been there for a little while now, and they've been stellar. They've transformed the dirty industrial lot, at least the way you see it from Miller, and turned it into, you know, a independent, green, owner-operated retail business. It's they've added hardscape and landscaping in the front. It makes it really look nice. They've added a lot to the Miller corridor, the pedestrian corridor. And so I think this variance would actually improve the neighborhood. It already looks much better since they've started renting there, and I think their presence will continue to generate new retail activity along the corridor, and I really want them there as a business neighbor across the street. And so I'd urge this body, it sounds like you guys are already going to approve it, but I'd urge you guys to know that, you know, to do it and know that other business members and neighbors also support the variance and support a Bloom City Club's presence in the neighborhood. Also, I'd like to urge everyone to please visit Waterhill Music Fest.
Thank you.
Sunday, May 6th. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other members? Please come up, state your name for the record.
Well, my name is Robert Frank. I live at 910 Spring Street. And I was coming here to talk about something that Matt had mentioned in some detail. And I just wanted to expound on that, where I'm walking down Spring Street all the time, sometimes driving down Spring Street, and there really has been a problem, unfortunately, with vehicles that are pulling in, and then there isn't room to turn around, and they're backing, and you can see how it is, they're backing right out onto Miller, and everyone's familiar with Miller. And there's, you know, there already has been accidents. There's been a number of near misses, which I've seen. And you also have people who, this just happened to me just the other day, that coming down Spring Street, stop at the stop sign, and they sit there and wait till something opens up in the front there for a space. And I don't, maybe, and I didn't know there was parking behind until today. But I think a lot of people don't know that there is. So even though I know parking isn't required, I would, you know, agree with the planning staff was talking about, of removing the parking in front. It's safer for pedestrians. People backing up don't see pedestrians easily with the cars coming down the road. But the reality is, if there's just a sign saying no parking, I think a lot of people are going to end up parking there to run in. So perhaps there could be, it's Bloom City Club, some requirement or encouragement of planters or some hardscaping or something there. So really that it's not an option to park, and that people will be parking in the back, so that when they come out, they'll be pulling forward, they'll be able to see traffic, see pedestrians and that. So I'm hoping that that could happen. I don't have any objections at all to Bloom City Club being there. It's just that problem with the parking in front and people backing out.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on the parking thing. I like Bloom City Club. I think they've done a really good job with their place. But I've tried pulling in there with my car, and I have a four-car sedan. It's a small car, and I can't make it into the back parking area, which means that you're sending bikers through the same corridor that my car can't fit into. It seems almost like it's probably you're inviting more accidents. I don't see how they can use the back parking lot as non-conforming, and I think that it'd be wise to use the front 2 parking spots for bike spots. Thank you.
Do you mind stating your name for the record?
Oh, yeah. My name's Drew Hutton.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Hello, name is Brenda Wade Shepherd, and I live next door to Bloom. He was talking about the parking and how you have to back out into the traffic. Well, my apartment next door, that's what I have to do every day. I have to back out because there's no room in that area for me to turn my car around and come straight out. And if you go up and down that street, you'll notice everybody has to back out unless they have a area in which they can turn their car around and come faced out. In the morning, it's very busy. So I run into that traffic that's coming from North Maple, and it's coming down Miller, and it's going downtown. And that's around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I have to back out. Takes a little bit of time. But I also notice on that corner where the bakery's at, Bloom, and then there's me. We kind of look out for each other. I've come out of there, and I've noticed the person over there is waiting for me to come out so that I can go up to the stop there. So I would say that it's orderly. It's very orderly when you don't have a way to come straight out into the traffic. And for 3 years now, I have been there, and we've not had any accidents in that area where somebody's backed out and somebody's crashed, somebody's came around the corner, you know. So I just wanted to help with that situation. And if you go up and down Miller, you'll find that everybody's backing out into traffic. But I think people are being a little bit helpful with one another, knowing that that's the way you have to come out your home. So just want to support Bloom.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission?
Hi, I'm Allison Ireton. I guess I'm the petitioner, and I don't think anyone else had, or one of the petitioners. The petitioner for Bloom, who's on the application, Patrick Kinney, is also here with me. I just had a point of, well, first of all, I want to thank you, because I know that this is a lot of time, all the medical marijuana zoning stuff that you guys are involved in. I know you've spent hundreds of hours, I'm sure, at this point on it, and you have a lot more to go. I also want to assure you that Bloom has the same goals as everybody sitting up there. Nobody wants to have a traffic accident out in front of a shop. I mean, it's horrific in and of itself, you know, people getting hurt, but then when it's attached to a business, I mean, it's just terrible. So we have the same goal that everybody here does. I just had a question. I was confused because I don't do this as part of my attorney work. There was a mention about removing the curb cut there. And I don't think Bloom has a problem removing the parking sign and trying to do staff education, like don't park here. Even putting, as might have been suggested, some planters out front that people can't park there. But it would, removing the curb cut would actually get rid of the ability for like FedEx and UPS to go in and out in a way that they can do that without having to back up onto Miller. Also, as a point of flow, just traffic flow there, if there were no parking spaces there, I mean, when it's not busy, people do go in and out of there. Sometimes they turn in, they're like, oh, this isn't, I can't remember, Muncie's anymore, and then they just go right out the other side. Or they're like, oh, this is not a floral shop, you know, and then they go right out the other side. So there are a lot of benefits to having the in and the out on Miller because, as Brenda had noted, people are backing up onto Miller all the time. I mean, that liquor store on Main Street is, the parking lot is the sidewalk on Main and a couple blocks from here. So it's not a unique condition in Ann Arbor, and I think the planner, Mr. Chen, was saying a one-way looping system, you know, is more of a safer way to do things. And for Bloom, if you get rid of that curb cut and somebody pulls in and it's like, oh, I don't want to be here, and someone else is trying to pull in behind them, they're stuck. They have nowhere to go. And also, larger trucks with that little opening that's in between 421 and 423 Miller, because those are separate addresses. It is one legal parcel, but they are separate addresses. If a truck can't fit through there, they have no choice but to back up. Or, if that is like a nice little looping system, and we can do things and work with you with your suggestions and our suggestions and, make it so that it functions as a looping system rather than just cutting out the curb cut and then forcing more people to, I think it would result in more people backing into Miller. So I think those are my only comments.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to address this petition? All right. So I will close the public comment, and since we are right at almost 9 o'clock, this is our break time, where we'll take a short 5-minute recess and reconvene for discussion and motion. Thank you. And we're back. Thank you. All right, and we're back, and we will start with the motion. So one of the things that Chair Klein has been really good about is he's been very kind to all of us by reading the motions. I do not plan to be kind to you guys, so I would like someone who's going to move this to read this motion. Commissioner Mills.
We're not voting.
The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 zoning ordinance, Section 5:104 special exceptions, and Section 5:50.1 regulations concerning medical use of marijuana, and therefore approves the Bloom City Club special exception use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the D2 Downtown Interface District, which provides for mixed uses including residential, commercial activities, including retail establishments, offices, and personal services. 2, the proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location. Miller Avenue provides access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with other surrounding uses' traffic impact. 3, through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have a detrimental impact on natural features. This special exception use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, the petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a State of Michigan medical marijuana license and a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and providing documentation to planning services within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 2, the petitioner obtaining a medical marijuana business, operating a medical marijuana business at this address within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 3, the petitioner will remove 2 parking spaces at the front of the building along Miller Avenue. And 4, that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exception use standards as no physical development of the property is proposed.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Weatherby. We are in discussion. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. So as we've been formulating things associated with medical marijuana, the ordinance, as we were discussing this, as other petitioners have come before us, Bloom is my point of reference. I walk past this every single day to take my children to daycare. And I agree with the neighbors who said this has been a welcome addition to the neighborhood. Their flowers are beautiful. It's understandable why people think it's a flower shop. And I mean, just the building itself has really improved. But as I've said previously too, my big concern, there's not loitering. Like, they commissioned the painting underneath the mural underneath the railroad bridge. Great neighbors. My biggest concern has been with the traffic, and it's the people backing out and blocking the sidewalk. And most of the time, I am walking by, sometimes cycling on the sidewalk, because I've got a 5-year-old who is learning to cycle. But that's the concern here. I think, so I'm in support of taking those parking spaces out of the front. I'm not necessarily in support of closing that curb cut entirely, like permanently removing it, because maybe someday they'll want to have a use of those garages again, and so once you take it out, I think that seems silly. But I actually would be in favor of putting planters. I think that you could still make a 3-point turn if you pull into the other entrance. You could make a 3-point turn so you don't actually have to back out. It's connected, like right now it's you. But my biggest question is, people do park there. So this is really for petitioner. I saw recently that you at least maybe were piloting parking a couple doors down. What's the plan? Because people will, are expecting something or have been driving there, so they got to go somewhere.
So Bloom just actually, as of May 1st, because they need office space. So I don't know, I mean, you guys are familiar with medical, sorry, ladies and gentlemen are familiar with medical marijuana. So all of the marijuana licensing for the state has to be contained within the address 423. So we can't have offices in there because it's so small already. So we recently rented the Purple House next door for office space, for break room space, for storage of dry goods, things that aren't marijuana. All the marijuana has to be contained in building 423. 421, just is old, and it's very hard to heat, and it has some structural issues, so we don't want to use that for that purpose. So we have, and I don't want to throw a big, huge monkey wrench into this whole thing, but we have been sort of trying to see if we could somehow utilize that backyard as a traffic flow that's more of a U by going into that driveway and cutting through the backyard, which is, actually, if you look at it now, there's gravel. And we've actually, just to your point, the backyard of the Purple House was a little bit of a junkyard, and now it is not. It is completely free of all debris. So that was sort of a way of addressing that, and that's why Bloom was asking us to wait until this meeting to make a final plan. Nobody wants to do anything about those parking spaces, curb cut, whatever, until we got a final response from this commission. But, it does make sense to take away those parking spots. Nobody knows how to park in the front anyway. So it's usually a mishmash of, I think I'm supposed to be like this, I think I'm supposed to be like that. I think there is a big opportunity to improve that flow. And it really is just going to take education to the patient base there, drawing maps, doing little graphs when they're sitting in the lobby. They've started training bud tenders and employees there to talk to people about, like, hey, did you see? And putting little cards in their box, in their bag as they leave. So there are lots of ways to educate the patient population. We were kind of waiting for this meeting to sort of see what was going to happen with that spot. But there can be signage. Brenda, who spoke before you, lives in the house that's owned by the Baptist Church. And that red brick building you can see in the corner runs along the driveway, which would be the entrance. And we're actually have a nice relationship with the Baptist Church. And we're talking about maybe drawing a mural there that says, like, parking, to try to direct people in that way. So in that way, that would alleviate some of those issues. But it's a concern of Bloom's. It's a concern of mine as one of the property owners there. We don't want that, and it causes complaints. The last thing you want to hear as a business is, I love your shop, but I hate this. You just want to problem solve and be a good neighbor. So we are working. And if you have any ideas, we're happy to implement them or put them in place. But I do see people when I'm there in the morning or doing things that do go in and go out. And I do think if you eliminated a curb cut, at least if they could pull in and sort of jog around something. I don't know. I just think if you eliminated a curb cut entirely, you would have people backing up into Miller more often than they already do. But I agree that eliminating the parking spaces will take care of probably 80% of the backing up situation.
Yeah. So from my perspective, and you'll presumably, you just got the parking spaces painted quite recently.
So somebody was doing some asphalt work on Main Street.
Yeah.
And you know how those guys come around and say, hey, can we asphalt your driveway for a really cheap price? So that was part of that, but
Okay.
I don't remember who painted them or why. I think they just put it back.
Yeah, it looks more formal now, which I having kind of known what's going on here that we've been seeing, I was like, oh yeah, I can see things kind of getting ready for this hearing. So because it appears to just have formalized it, you might need added measures at least temporarily.
Sure.
And, I'm kind of the eyes on the street, so I'm going to know, oh, they're not supposed to be parking there, for better or for worse. And you do get me twice a day, every day, walking by. So thank you.
Oh, sure.
This is a question for staff. Is the plan, there is a spot there's a spot in front of the place, the garage to the east, is that intended that that doesn't have to be removed? Or at least it's striped right now?
Oh, I was not aware that that was striped. I think that structure's a little bit farther back than the main building.
It is.
I could look at my
And
survey
this is where
site
I'm
plan. So
talking
I
about,
didn't,
like, I think you can almost make a three-point turn there.
right, I didn't comment
from
on that one,
spot.
but I believe it is, right, from our survey somewhere. That one is a little bit farther back. They have the ability to back out and go, and like you said, a three-point turn and go like that.
Yeah,
versus
it's
the other
tight.
ones did not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that could be an issue. I didn't examine that one in particular. I didn't realize that one was striped. Didn't see that.
It just appeared, so. I welcome other thoughts. I am hugely supportive of not having parking in front of the building, but also recognize that I can't imagine any other than like micro mini something getting through between those two buildings. So I just don't know how that's going to work. So I recognize that this isn't a place where where parking isn't required. And so that's why, we're not saying, like, show us where people are going to be parking, but people have been driving there. So you've got to tell them to go somewhere. I think I've seen people parking at Maynard Battery or whatever that is, just on the other side of the railroad tracks in the big parking lot. I don't know if there's a relationship that you can have, because that's where the semis who can't get underneath the bridge turn around. So, yeah, but that's my thoughts on that.
Other thoughts? Are we ready for a vote? Great.
Just-
Commissioner Gabrandel?
Yeah, so if there could be some sort of relationship with the Purple House, it seems like there is room behind your lot to be able to turn around and not have to go thread the needle. I don't know if that's...
And I might have these distances wrong, and my friends in the back might be able to help me, but I think the space between 421 and 423 is, I think, 9 feet.
Could you clarify? That's the two brick?
The two brick buildings
Okay,
on
yeah.
the
Yeah, that's
parcel.
too
And then
skinny, right.
the alleyway or the driveway next to 429 is like 9.5 feet.
Oh,
It's not much wider.
Got it.
And really, honestly, the only concerns I have are because it happened today, because Spring Street was closed today. So a FedEx truck stopped in the bike lane in front of Bloom because it couldn't pull in. And if there was a way that if we could deliveries only, like in and out, and if it was even if where the two parking spots are in front of 423, where the stripe is, was landscaped, and it was just literally like a driveway where you can't really stop, or else you can't get two cars back and forth, then at least deliveries could come in, drop off, and leave. Because a big, FedEx, or, literally, we have Ford F-150s that put their mirrors in and drive through the 9 feet. So there are people that get back there. They're brave. Not everybody takes that choice. But, for larger trucks, I just don't want delivery trucks, like, even some deliveries today to nights, you had 3 trucks backed up in the bike lane on Miller. And I don't want that to be the choice that delivery trucks make, is, well, if we can't get in and get out without having to take a 3-point turn in my FedEx or UPS truck, then I'm just going to stop on Miller and unload there. So that's, yeah. I don't know what he just said.
Yeah, I'm usually not a fan of 2 curb cuts, but in some ways it feels like it may be wise to leave that open, just for the pull-through. And I would say that all the driveways on Miller are back up, but you all get a heck of a lot more
Sure.
traffic
No,
than
I
any of
agree with
those
you, yeah,
residential properties do. So it is a very different situation in my mind. And, people aren't hanging out here for 3 hours, right? They're
No.
probably coming in, doing their business and getting out. So I'm sure you generate some traffic. So, there are cars that want to come there, right?
Yes.
So no easy solutions on that one.
Anyone else?
Oh, no. Well, I thought you were getting ready to vote, because I had a couple, point of clarification and one question, actually.
Sure.
To make sure that I'm straight on, I get the parking removal there, but I wasn't sure if if the planning commission had decided any kind of hardscape treatment in that area, planners, and if there's a little more direction on that, so we know so the petitioner knows too, and we're kind of clear. The second point, actually, which is a clarification, which is something I just heard here, which sends up warning signs. The parking, the adjacent, I don't know what, that's 429? No, what's the address? Yeah, that's not going to fly, because that triggers a site plan in itself.
Right.
Any cut through or use of that property is not permitted.
Well, that would be another place for employees to park or
But
appointments.
well, we can follow that up
Yeah.
after the meeting. I don't mean to
Okay.
confuse the issue, but I
Okay.
just didn't want planning commission to count on that for any type of
Okay.
parking, because it's not a parking lot, and it hasn't been a parking lot. They can convert it to a parking lot, but it would trigger site plan.
Okay.
So any kind of use through there would not be permitted. So I just didn't want commission to base it on that. So anyway, but my first question was regarding the hardscape treatment or any kind of planters type things in the front.
Since they've posted signs, that state, I've driven by it, I don't know the exact language, but there are signs that have been posted recently that says something, park here.
Yeah.
And that's at 429.
We can't do that. Those have to be removed.
We did. That was actually just for hash bash because we knew it was going to create problems, but it's not there.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, we just have to
I'm
be
sure
clear, and
you
we'll probably
walked by
follow
it.
up with
It's
that.
not there.
And it wasn't there this morning.
No.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Yeah. It's temporary.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, I was just kind of comment on what you said. Basically, I'm thinking of Argus when I'm kind of picturing this, and this is a lot more amenable, but because the parking has changed so much at that location, there's just been some odd parking patterns, and I think maintaining a kind of a circular in and out there, given the delivery, makes some sense, but I wonder how planters that sort of, I kind of see those as linear lines. I don't know. I don't have a recommendation. I mean, but I do like your concept of somehow directing people to go, maybe by paint on the ground, where, that they should be going in and out. And I don't have a recommendation beyond that.
Commissioner Gabrandel.
Oh, I think.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Next.
I just have a question. For staff, what's the enforcement mechanism if, we discover, Commissioner Mills walks by and sees cars parking up front? Is that just a see-click fix kind of thing? What are the consequences if there's violations going on?
Well, we do a couple of things. I mean,
Yeah.
the remedy, I'm not sure how somebody would directly report it to us, although we have several staff that live in the neighborhood as well.
Right.
I feel like when there's anything out of place, we're going to know about it. So that's our most effective means. So honestly, it may come in through that see-click fix or whatever, or directly to planning staff. I mean, it'll ultimately come to me since I was the one in that handled the petition. Our first opportunity for contact is usually going to be just contact them and say, look, we found this, you guys, you had to remove that, and hopefully they get on it, fix it. If it repeatedly comes an issue, then, eventually the special exception use could be revoked. But, we would probably deal with enforcement before we got to that point. And, we try and do it a little bit sweeter first, and they've been willing to comply so far. So if not, then we have to take a little more heavy-handed. But we don't go out and write tickets automatically.
Right, yeah. That just gets to, I'm comfortable not having a super specific recommendation for how those spots get closed off,
Okay,
because
that's
we know
fine.
if it's not happening, we have the tool to, up to and
Yes.
including taking away the special exception use. So I'm totally comfortable with just having the language as is.
Commissioner Gabrandel.
I would say that, in my mind, paint doesn't cut it, because I think people will just be like, but it's easier for me to pull across it. So that's been my experience, and I think what should happen is that you should grind off the striping that's there, and that you should put some sort of three-dimensional something, whether it's a planter, which would be in keeping with all the other wonderful things you've done there, or, hopefully it's not a concrete barricade or something like that. But I think there should be some three-dimensional object out there that's going to make it difficult for a car to get through there. So I would advocate for that and not just striping it or hoping, because I don't think it's going to happen if we just hope.
I agree with you, actually.
So, the other thing I would like to say too is that, just for the listening audience, is that it's really helpful for us when we have neighbors show up with these provisioning centers that have a track record, and that we can hear what they've been like as neighbors, and that's really important to us. If people have opinions about the ones that are near them and how they are as neighbors, we like to hear about that, and it makes it a lot easier for us to feel good about passing it as a special exception use. And I think you've had people here, and I think people on the Planning Commission have experienced the positive changes that you've made to that area, so.
Commissioner Briggs.
Speaking as Councilmember Ackerman's voice right now, he's requesting that that be codified, your recommendation, as an amendment to the, in this special exception use. So I would assume perhaps as within the commission, within the number 3, perhaps.
He might be referencing the, from City Council directed Planning Commission to take up consideration of our citizen participation ordinance specifically to, no?
No, I'm just suggesting that if Commissioner Gibrandel wants to see exactly, that we add it as a condition.
Okay. Does that mean I have to come up with the language for it?
Sure does.
This is the first time I've done that. So where am I looking?
Here.
Yeah.
I would say you amend the condition of number 3. The petitioner
Yeah.
will remove 2 parking spaces at the front of building along Miller and place
By
fixtures
or by
other
grinding off the current striping and by,
removes- okay.
and by placing
Physical
barriers
Yeah, that's good.
of some.
to direct safe traffic flow or something.
To be clear, we don't mean barriers. We mean something 3-dimensional.
Jersey barriers? No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
right.
I'm totally kidding.
Well, we'll leave it flexible because so far so good on the choices you've
Yeah.
made with.
We'll do something with that.
Jersey barrier.
Oh, I hate those things.
And just to be clear, if I may, the idea is that we keep it open for a one-way drop-off zone effectively.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, and I don't know if this could be accomplished, but if there were like on-street parking there and a loading zone there, would that meet the needs and eliminate the need for curb cuts?
I'm not sure what you mean by
Imagine
that.
like a bus pull-off, but for parking and loading.
Well, the only thing I would say about that is that really the future of the building known as 421, that little small one that used to be a car wash, is sort of uncertain, unknown, and I can't say what the future, like, you might need a curb cut there, or I don't know. I just don't know.
There's a pole there.
Hard to answer right now.
So could we get so that's a, so we're going to, so let's read the number 3 one more time, just so we know what we're voting on.
The petitioner will remove 2 parking spaces at the front of the building along Miller Avenue, remove the striping, and place physical barriers to prevent parking.
Is that friendly with the person who moved it? And I'm not sure who's
Mills
seconding.
and Weatherby? Oh, okay.
Oh, with the people who moved it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Is that friendly?
Yep.
Great. All right, further discussion. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Moving on to 10C, 1101 South University Edition site plan for city council approval. And we have Mr. Kowalski again.
Yes, yeah, I'm here for the rest of this day now, no more switcheroo planners. Okay, so as we indicated, 1101 South University. See here up on your screen, obviously the aerial to the left. The zoning map to the right, the parcel is zone D1, it's downtown core. You can see the building is the parcel currently. Obviously not a recent aerial photo. The building now, as many of you are probably aware, surrounding it is gone. It's the the Collegian development that's currently under construction. And in addition to that, you probably are also aware that South University is pretty well torn up in that location as well. So there is a revised, updated memo that was here. I hope you all have before you, that we handed out regarding, it's an updated memo. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. It doesn't change the nature of the project in any way, but it does add another requirement. So briefly, I'm going to go through the site plan requirements right now. The petitioner's basically proposing a 3-story addition to the existing structure. Currently, what stands there now is a 2-story Espresso Royale, I believe, building. 2 stories, as well as a functional basement, coffee shop in the basement, coffee shop on the first floor, as well as office uses on the second floor. The petitioner is proposing to add 3 stories to the existing building, keeping the 2-story, keeping the existing building there, adding the 3 stories above of residential uses. They're proposing 3 apartments, so basically 1 on each floor. A total of 16 new bedrooms between the 3 floors. Logistical requirements, obviously there's no natural features on the site. The site is the building. Stormwater detention is being addressed through off-site easements, and it's taken care of in the adjacent Collegian building. They have a large cistern stormwater detention system in their basement. Petitioner has obtained the rights or the ability to use that, and they have pretty minimal stormwater input to that system as well. Solid waste, in addition, is also taken care of through, they have kind of a route of egress that goes through their building in kind of a joint hallway that they're using that will utilize the alleys behind the Collegian building that's under construction right now. So it'll be used for solid waste as well as, I guess, other means of ingress and egress to the facility. There also will be required, so they are required bicycle parking. They are providing lockers. They did get an off-site easement to provide those lockers in the location there as well. Getting to the, so the updated memo, there was an error that was discovered in the FAR calculations. What that does is push them just, I believe it's 49 square feet over the maximum floor area that's permitted. So that kicks them into the use of premiums. With the use of premiums, it requires a parking space, 1 for every 1,000 square feet of floor area. So they have 49 square feet, but that does require a parking space. The petitioner is in negotiation with the DDA. I've seen the communication going back and forth about fulfilling that requirement as permitted through the code through a lease of a parking space in a public structure. So that's ongoing. They will be, I believe, discussing that next week or so. I think it's the 25th or something at the DDA board meeting. We don't anticipate any problems with that. As a result of that, though, there is also a development agreement that was formulated. The only requirement of the development agreement is the off-site parking. There's some standard language in there, but there's no other off-site improvements that are required. Utilities are in place, obviously. The streetscape improvements was another source of discussion. They also have agreement between the DDA, the Collegian developer. It's quite a long and confusing process of who's installing when, but I have assurances that it is all going to be taken care of. I believe construction's going to, obviously a much smaller building, I think, and the petitioner is here tonight that can respond to the construction schedule, but I think they're going to be probably finishing up about the same time. Here's some images of it. Again, the first and second story are existing, so this 3 stories directly above it. They are not knocking down the building and adding 5. They're just adding 3 to the existing. So this is a South University view. And here is from this one from East University, I believe, yes. So this is from the pedestrian mall, East University. And then you can see the newer building for perspective directly adjacent. Here's that looking from the north. So obviously the gray part is the proposed Collegian under development. Again, and here's a much larger area to kind of give you some of the perspective view. And then here again. So again, at this time, staff is recommending approval, contingent upon the execution of the contract for the required parking space in the public structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. I will now open up public hearing for this agenda item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and move on to the motion. The motion is as follows. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve 1101 South University site plan and development agreement contingent upon the execution of a contract for the lease sale of one vehicle parking space within the public parking system. Do I have a commissioner that would move this? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. We are in discussion. Commissioner Weatherby.
So for the petitioner, is the front on the first floor, the first and second floor, it looks like there are going to be some changes to the front facade, corner facade?
So currently on the front.
Are you taking away the Cava Java sign?
No. It's actually Espresso Royale, and they're staying.
But the CJ is still up there.
No, the CJ is still there.
Is it?
Yeah, and
I'll
it's stone.
look at it if it's there. The front western portion of the building is a single-story addition to what was the original two-story building. So we're going to be adding vertically to the entire footprint. So we'd be adding 3 stories over what is now 2 stories, and also adding 3 stories over what is now 1 story. So you can see there's a notch at the top floor missing over that addition. So we're putting 3 on both parts of the building. It results in a outdoor patio or terrace on the upper floor. And then we're going to clad that uncharacteristically white pseudo-masonry product with thin brick so that it all comes together as a unified whole.
Okay. The interior of these, right now there's 6 bedrooms or 2 6-bedrooms and a 4-bedroom or?
Second floor and first floor are, this first and second floor are the residential, so that'd be the third and fourth floor are 6 bedrooms each. The top floor, because of its reduced footprint, is 4 bedrooms.
And are those structural? Could these be made into a luxury 2-bedroom condo at some point?
It could be converted, absolutely. The building is so narrow that the structural system free spans, so it would be possible at some later date to rearrange the internal floor plan.
Okay.
Maybe the market, or?
Yeah. Personally, I sort of like this in some ways because it does, I think, balance out some of the much taller building behind it. I think it won't look quite so overwhelming having that 2-story building, and so I'm in favor of this. I do wish you were doing full face brick, but, you know.
The weight of the full face brick, the intent is to retain the existing structure so we don't have to demolish what's there. So we're limited by the bearing capacity of what's already there in terms of how much additional weight we can put on top, and that just eliminated the possibility of doing the full depth. We're going to use the same system we used at the Mark, where the windows are set back from the front plane, so that for all intents and purposes, it looks like a full depth masonry, so that you get the masonry sill projecting from the windows. You don't get that flush mount on the windows. So for all intents and purposes, no one will know.
And then are the balconies functional?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills.
I read the notes from the design review board, but it's difficult for me, like I couldn't figure out, can you tell us what changed since they gave the comments?
It's hard for me to point
On a
with
different slide, or?
No, that's fine. Well, I go to that one first, the two-dimensional one. One of the things they asked us to do was reinforce the horizontality of the difference between what was there and what's vertically being added above the second floor. So we continued a row lock course horizontally around to create a band on the building. And then they asked us to add some more decorative brickwork on that 45-degree corner to further enhance its visual impact. So we changed the masonry arrangement and surrounded that front corner with different kind of brick coursing. They asked us to pull the shade devices over the windows closer to the top of the windows. They had been a little bit higher to make them more effective in giving that shade on the south side to those windows to reduce the solar gain, and then to put a slightly larger canopy at that 45-degree front entrance, which we did.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
So speaking of the sunshade things, why are they on some of the windows and not on there? I just noticed they're on the top row, there's a few in the second row, and then that third row down, there's one, so I'm just wondering what just curious about the design and reason for that.
When we had them initially at the same place we had the balconies, it just cluttered up the elevation too much. So we tried to eliminate them where we already had balconies, so the opening wasn't bracketed both top and bottom, giving you kind of tunnel vision.
Got it, so in other words, all the ones that don't have the sunshades have balconies on them.
In the residential portions of the building, and that's where you put them. Yeah.
What will happen with the current businesses that are operating there? It sounds like Espresso Rail will be back. Are they going to stay in business while this is happening, or?
That is the intent. We are actually just working with them. They're going to invest some money in redoing the interior design, so we've been working with their designer to coordinate those efforts so that there's a minimum impact to the business. So yeah, the intent is to keep everybody, that's their tenant now, still would be a tenant when we're done. There may be portions of time when, for safety reasons, if we're craning materials, we may have to shut them down for a week or 10 days or something. It'll be a construction coordination issue.
Commissioner Trudeau.
I just want to say, I agree. I like the scale of this next to the adjacent building. I appreciate the effort at preserving the existing structure and using that and building on top of it rather than just doing something completely new. I think it looks pretty good. And that I like the scale. I wish we had more buildings at this scale, that they're more adaptable over time instead of some of these giant ones that are sort of pretty hard fixed. So yeah, I think it's a good little fill right there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
One other thing, how you're going up, what happens to the windows of the building behind it that were at the third and fourth story level?
If you could get to the west elevation.
Nope. Rowan?
Are you talking about the windows in the adjacent building?
So, in other words, this kind of pops up. It's not like.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, so
you're not blocking anybody's windows.
Right. The tower, their street wall is 2 stories height, and their tower portion is set back. Yeah.
Got it. So there's no conflict there. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the view that the first 2 floors of the high-rise would have, looking at the backside of our building. And we decided to pop some fire-rated glass block openings so they just weren't looking at a blank wall.
Commissioner Briggs.
Just one quick question. It looks like with the recalculation of the floor area that it triggered the need for leasing 1 parking space. If that wasn't a requirement of the city, is that something that you would still be doing? Okay. Thank you.
All right, looks like we're ready for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's approved. Thank you. Moving on to item 10D, 1115 Broadway Special Exception Use and Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval. And we'll start with our staff report. Mr. Kowalski.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, this one, I'm going to give just a really brief intro. We are recommending postponement at this time. We're working to address some of the parking requirements for it. With the petitioner, they're actively working on it. It may be back in time for the May 1st meeting, but just to give you a little brief intro here, subject site, many of you are probably familiar with this. It's the former Hallmark store, flower shop, and obviously a church originally. Located here, it is zoned, it is a commercially zoned property, it's zone C3, so for commercial zoning. There is a parking lot that currently has about 10 cars, spaces for 10 cars in it, immediately adjacent. You can see it is 2 parcels. Well, it was 2 parcels. They have since combined it, or they're very close to officially combining the parcels. So that's why the line seems to run through, well, at least this blue parcel line run through the parking lot. But that will be addressed. They're combining the parcels. And again, zone C3, one of the questions that has come up from a commissioner member, Shannon, if I could just throw it out there, was regarding the sidewalk along, and I didn't include that because for the tabling, was regarding a sidewalk along Plymouth Road. So they are proposing to close the curb cut. You can't see it in this photo, but there is a curb cut existing at Plymouth Road. It's kind of been functionally closed for years now. I don't know how long. They've had planters in front of it and bumper blocks there. But the petitioner is going to remove that and restore it, grass it, and everything else consistent with city standards. That's obviously supported by the traffic engineer. So the question anyway, going back to Commissioner Gibrandel, was regarding the sidewalk along that Plymouth section. We just found out like this afternoon actually that as part of the development for the 1140 Broadway, I believe that's the large Broadway or Broadway Village, former Broadway Village site. They have agreed to install the sidewalk along this section of Plymouth Road. So basically they will fill in this sidewalk gap from Broadway here to the intersection of Maiden Lane. It gets very tight in this area, kind of right here. There's a pinch point with Plymouth Road. I think it's not quite 7 feet wide, not optimal, but obviously as you can tell from the aerial photos and going out there, it's a very well-used path. So, again, with a barrier or something else like that. So, but again, at this time, staff is recommending a postponement due to addressing the parking needs on the site at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open public comment. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And before us, we have a motion. Since this is most likely going to postponement, I will just ask that this is recorded in our record, but I will not force anyone to read this. I will just ask someone to move it and then second it. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandel. And we are in discussion. Commissioner Ackerman. It's been moved to postponement to a date uncertain. Do we have a second for motion to postpone? Commissioner Trudeau?
I would just like to say one thing before they try to resubmit. Is that possible?
Sure.
I have rarely seen such a offensive-looking ADA ramp up to a building before, and if they could just try to rejigger that thing, I mean, it is so in-your-face awful, and I totally get that you want to be able to get people up to the front door, but as part of when they come back, please, please just try to figure out to come up with a more creative way of getting people up to that front door besides what they have there right now. I would just like to have them think about that if they come back, that it would be really nice if they could rethink that, because it feels so tacked on, and it's such a beautiful old building, and it just is a total eyesore, the way that that's been handled.
I will certainly relay that to the petitioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So it's been moved for postponement, seconded. Other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? It is postponed until a date uncertain. Moving on to audience participation. This is the time for the audience to participate in our meeting. You have up to 3 minutes to come speak to us if you'd like. And seeing no one, I will move on to Commission Proposed Business and Commissioner Mills.
I would like to ask planning staff to have our list of potential ORC projects to consider to reflect consideration of looking at, how do I say this, housing options in the hinterlands. I don't know. How do I say that? Yeah, go ahead.
Evaluate potentially some standard about a diversity or mix of housing types in appropriate areas of the city.
Yes, thank you very much. You knew where I was going, clearly. Outside of the, yeah.
Great. Any other commission proposed business? Seeing no one, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Gabrandel, seconded by Commissioner Mills. We are adjourned. Thank you.